All right, 40K enthusiasts. And I'm targeting this at 40K enthusiasts because there's a perception. There's a perception. I'm not saying it's the reality everywhere or the reality all the time, but there's a perception that this is like more a 40K thing than another wargaming system type thing. And this is building on some mailbag and a question that I was asked. You know, Fritz, you played in some tournaments. You played at a number of gaming clubs. You've been playing 40K for a while. What about table flippers? Have you seen it? Is that a thing? And of course, we're going to turn it over to the 40K community and turn it over to you guys, because I won't say my meta is the entire meta or that it's even close to your meta. But the idea being, have you seen or experienced? I mean, we've all heard stories. The community is a little spicy place. But have you seen or experienced people that have flipped tables, people that have lost it, people that have nerd raged and just had enough in 40K? You know, bad actors from that perspective. So my thought, thinking back, you know, the 40K community, I have to say, is good. There's a lot of dedicated, passionate players out there that feel very, very strongly about their armies. And what I have noticed, the synergy between board games and 40K is the level of entry into 40K. You know, that's not to say we don't have our bad actors, but you kind of got to be in. You got to buy into the narrative. You got to buy into the cult. And then you got to literally buy into the models and miniatures. And even if you have a starter army or you're a little bit lax in your army, you know, meaning maybe it's not painted, or I've played against a couple of armies in the days that were just like torsos on bases. You have to commit to something in order to play the game. Compared to board games, I've seen more board gaming, the board gaming community, more bad actors because the buy-in is much, much less. Just one board game. Yes, some Kickstarters get very expensive, but I can sit down and play and I don't need to bring my army, right? 40K, we've got a social contract. I sit down and bring my army. You got to bring your army. And sometimes I lend out some of my armies, but you understand we meet equally at the table. So you've invested time, effort, money, passion. That's going to kind of keep things under control a little bit. I've seen more craziness in the board gaming community because you just sit down or someone sits down to play a title and things don't go their way, and you can have your little fit. You can have your little nerd rage explosion because it didn't cost you to buy anything in. So in the 40K ecosystem, there is kind of this built-in safeguard. But that said, we can get very passionate. Players can get very passionate. You're investing time, you're investing money, the dice. You know, the rules don't help in 40K. I'll say that. The rules do not help. You can be doing everything right, come to a critical junction, and just the dice go south and there's no way to correct it with Tactica. I mean, it's sometimes the rules punish you for that. There are times where I think the rules do a great job of capturing the grimdark narrative, but there's that swinginess, and some people, you know, they can't deal with the swinginess. And I think what also leads to this rage is the fact that most things in 40K can be bypassed by volume of dice. You know, I think the easiest example that I can think of this was back in the day of having Terminators with a 2-up save, having Terminators with multiple wounds. These were powerful systems and synergies, especially if you can put on units and attach things that can regenerate or ignore wounds in smaller point games. That was a tough, that was a tough thing to crack. So you take that, and there's this expectation, plus in the narrative, that these are elite units, when it's like, dude, I'll bypass your stuff just by buckets and buckets of dice. I'll charge in just tons and tons of Necron warriors, tons of wasteoid gaunts, and just roll lots and lots of dice and torrent you down. 40K, the answer to everything is just torrent it down. So when you're confronted with that, where the narrative doesn't match up to the presentation, it's easily to get pissed because you're like, that's not supposed to happen. These are supposed to be elite type units. So that mismatch can also fuel that rage a little bit. So table flippers. I've never seen it. The only table flip that I saw, which wasn't a true table flip, was we were playing a game, and we used to play at Comic Book Heaven, which was a comic store. Sometimes you'd play inside the store. Sometimes you would play outside the store. It was in a mall, and we had like a little area to play. So you would bring out the gaming tables and put them on a folding table, and the boards were foam board cut into 3 sections. So this way you could lay down 1, 2, and 3, put the terrain, because it had to be transported and broken out. It wasn't a solid table like maybe you see at some clubs. Inside the store, they had a couple of solid tables. So there was one army, which was so well done, just an amazing, amazing Terminator army, that they were playing. And someone came up to watch the game, and it worked out well because you'd have people coming up interested in 40K, seeing things. So they're interested in watching the game, and they didn't really know table etiquette, or this is just common sense etiquette. They put their kid down on the table, sitting on the edge of the table. Well, you sit on the edge of the board, that catapults the other side of the board. These miniatures went flying literally in the air. I mean, time slowed down, and just you hear that sound of just crunch and arms breaking off and metal dreadnoughts at the time just exploding, Terminators snapping, banners snapping. It was bad. I mean, we collectively stopped playing for a little bit. You know, the echo and the warp was just so much. I mean, that's a table flip, but that wasn't a bad actor type flip. But what I have seen 2 instances, so on the technical level asking this question, the subscriber asking this, no, I've never seen a table flip. I've seen a table flip, but not a table flip. What I have seen are people launch their dice down the hallway, and it's always Chess X dice, where just, you know, you're rolling and it's just awful, and they're like, I've had enough. And I've seen people launch them down the hallway. I've seen people occasionally just be like, all right, I'm stepping outside for 5 minutes because I literally need to cool off because this is just insane. I've seen a few people dance around the table. I've danced around the table once or twice doing the I can't believe it dance. I've seen that happen once in a while, just stuff like that. But again, never really any like crazy unhinged bad actors or never any like stuff where it's like just to get you banned from the store or banned for the club, maybe banned for other things, but never in that moment. And I think mainly because, again, the buy-in to 40K requires a commitment. It requires, buying into the system, an investment, and that bar of entry, even if you're playing a smaller game with starter armies, there's a level of ownership there. There's a level of ownership that doesn't quite exist in other hobby type systems, other type board gaming type systems. Certainly, and I love Dungeons and Dragons. If you've been following my channel, if you've been checking out my blog, some of the other collaborations, I love D&D. It's a big part of my life. 1/3 D&D, 1/3 wargaming, 1/3 board gaming. D&D, because the buy-in is at this point 0. Character sheet on your tablet, virtual dice, or at the very minimum, a lot of D&D players you just have your own set of dice and character sheets. I mean, there are buy-ins for miniatures and stuff, but the level of buy-in compared to the popularity of D&D and the fact that some dungeon masters are not very proficient and they take on a role that's confrontational. I've seen some crazy stuff in D&D. I've seen some D&D groups. I've been a part of some D&D groups. Thankfully, none that I've ever run, but I've seen them implode. I've seen them go supernova, and I've seen some crazy stuff on the D&D spectrum. And that's not a slight against D&D at all. The community brings a lot of things together. It's given me a lot of opportunities that I wouldn't have elsewhere to make friends and collaborate. But with a 0 bar of entry, D&D is a different beast. Okay, turning it over to you guys, because I'm kind of curious now, but that's the mailbag question. Every Monday here, I try to go through the comments and check out the submission form on my blog, work my way through some mailbag. The mailbag for table flippers, no, I haven't. I think the 40K community, we're pretty blessed and pretty lucky for that. I don't know, in the comments, am I right, wrong, or somewhere in the middle?